Greetings, Africa, Zonga, Africa, and the diaspora, and thanks very much for tuning in to yet another episode of the EFF podcast. My name is Titus Tsungur Kotanam and we're coming to you from Winnie Madikizela Mandela House. And today, in the building, we have Dr. Gumani Tshimomola, the EFF Senior Researcher, just to come to talk to us about the budget fiasco, the budget that refuses to budget, and the budget that never was. I almost said commissar. But Doc, thank you very much for coming through to the EFF podcast. Welcome.
No, thank you for the invitation, Titus. Thank you very much.
And you come at a very critical time when the country is in limbo in terms of the budget. But before we talk about the budget, I want us to observe just a moment of silence on the passing of the police officers whose bodies were found dead in the Hypnos River in Centurion. So, Doc, the Western Cape High Court has ruled in favour of the EFF, setting aside the 2025 Fiscal Framework and the revenue proposal, as well as the VAT increase. Why was it so important for the EFF to approach the courts, thus subjecting the legislative process to a judicial process?
No, thanks, Titus. I think what is important with the Western Cape High Court order is that as the EFF, we attended the Standing Committee on Finance meeting that was held on the 1st of April.
Okay, on April Fool's Day.
April Fool's Day. We thought it was a joke at some point. We couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
But what happened in that meeting is that for the first time, we went to that meeting where the ANC did not have majority.
Okay.
So we thought we stood a chance to make proposals. We tabled proposals as to how we should amend the fiscal framework. So Parliament is allowed by law to amend a proposal tabled by the Minister of Finance, Fiscal Framework, Division of Revenue Bill, the Appropriation Bill, and Revenue Bills. We have that powers as Parliament to make amendments. So we thought, since the ANC does not have majority, let's go and table these proposals, and we did. But when the ANC realized that the proposals we're tabling are sensible, practical, and it's very difficult to disagree with them, they then maneuvered the process, did something unprocedural, and left us with no choice but having to go to court.
Okay.
Because if that meeting was conducted according to the Money Bills Amendment procedure, I can tell you now, there was no way around amending the fiscal framework. So we thought, let's take it serious. This is the first time Parliament has an opportunity to amend the fiscal framework to influence the budget and actually give direction to how much we must allocate to education. If we're allocating money to appoint more teachers, how much must be allocated to health? Because we saw doctors protesting in the Eastern Cape who have completed their community service programs but are unemployed. So we were taking that opportunity in that committee to say, let's do it differently. And when we raised the matter of procedure, they did not listen at all. The chairperson of the committee, Dr. Maswanganye, firstly, I think he was not aware of the procedure. But when we made him aware of the procedure, he did not listen, which led to the adoption of the 2025 Fiscal Framework and Revenue Proposals in an unprocedural manner. We raised the same issue with the Speaker of the National Assembly, Metoko Didiza, to say we were in the meeting. This is the process, was not followed, and we think you should not allow this report to be presented by the chair of the committee. She did not listen. Okay. Her reasons were very rational. She didn't even give herself the benefit of listening to the audio to say what was what transpired in the meeting. As for that reason, we were compelled to take the matter to the Western Cape High Court to seek relief for both the setting aside of the fiscal framework and then the suspension of VAT. And we're glad that the court agreed with us. So that's why it was important.
Sure. And if you look at the procedural blunders that we committed by Parliament or members of Parliament, what really happened in terms of breaching Section 8, subsection 4 of the Monies Bill Amendment Procedure and Related Matters Act of 2009. How did the parties in Parliament actually collude and act in an illegal manner in adopting this fiscal framework?
Yeah, so firstly, at the beginning of that meeting, Commissar Snao Tambo raised a point to the chair to say that given that we have to make a decision as the committee, and what was the decision? According to the money bills that we have alluded to, Section 8.4, it reads that the committee, and this is the only committee that has that directive, the committee should state clearly whether it accept or amend the fiscal framework as tabled by the Minister of Finance. And if you make that decision first, you then are able to write a report influenced by that decision. So how you frame the report will be from the decision, then the report. So the committee wanted to put the report first and then the decision later, right?
Okay.
So we said it doesn't make sense. A report is a reflection of a decision. So you must first make a decision and then move on to a report.
Okay.
The logic that you can first write a report and then later on seek to make a decision was irrational.
Okay.
Right? But, and this was not the first time, by the way. We've raised this in the previous meetings of the Standing Committee on Finance. Now, the difficulty here is that they did not want to make the decision first because the decision, whether you accept or amend, was not going to carry favor if they sought to keep the proposals of the Minister of Finance in terms of the fiscal framework as it is.
Okay.
Because firstly, everyone has rejected VAT.
Okay.
So
yes.
if you all reject a VAT increase of 0.5 percentage point, it is then sensible that you must then take the fiscal framework and then go and amend it and say, according to the committee, we're not going to accept VAT. So those powers are well within the committee.
Okay.
And that was the argument we're making. So the chair did not listen. And this is why I think he was starting to appreciate that 8.4 clause of the money bills for the first time. And then we realized that, okay, we're not going to win this fight. There's currently a tendency of trying to do things the way they've happened in the past 30 years. But the people who are doing that don't realize that now they don't have the majority to could just bulldoze decisions that are irrational. So we thought, let's wait and deal with the VAT issue, because we knew that when it comes to the VAT issue, there are going to be discussions. And it happened like that. So when we dealt with the report, some section of the report, we were happy just to make input here and there.
Okay.
Finally, we go to the VAT part.
Sure.
Now, I was sitting next to Alan Beasley. Alan Beasley is a member of Action SA in Parliament. So he raised his hand on the VAT issue. He raised his hand, and you can tell that it was a caucus position between him and the ANC, right?
Sure.
Because his vote in that committee was the tiebreaker. So he raised his hand and then he reads his proposal. And his proposal says that we are amending the minister's fiscal framework so that there's no VAT.
Yes, sure.
Okay, I look at
that was his position, initial position.
I look at Commissars now, he's smiling. And then ANC comrades, in their majority, said, no, we agree with that proposal of amending the fiscal framework.
Okay.
With conditions, and that's for me, it's neither here nor there. But the point is, he says we're amending the fiscal framework so that there's no VAT.
And that was also the position of the EFF.
That was our position. It was a position of everyone in the meeting, including the ANC, because they agreed to it. You know, when you raise a motion in a committee, it must be seconded.
Okay, sure.
Right? So you moved, and then some ANC comrades second. And then Commissar now says, no, Chair, wait. Are we now amending the fiscal framework? Have you arrived at that decision? Okay. And then the chair looks at him and says, okay. He knows the implication of amending the fiscal framework. When you amend the fiscal framework, it means that you are going to table to the House something that is completely different to what the minister tabled. That's the first thing.
Sure.
But the second thing is that once you amend it, you must then give the minister 2 days to give comments on the amendment. What were the implications of that? The 1st of April was exactly 15 days after the budget was tabled on the 12th of March.
Sure.
Which meant that The 2nd of April was the 16th day. So if you read the money bills, it says that you have 16 days. This is section 83. You have 16 days to take back a report to the National Assembly for adoption.
Sure.
So the committee didn't have time. So it was going to be now failing in its mandate to take a report back to the National Assembly. And the chair was aware of that. So he prioritized some malicious compliance with the 16 days period at the expense of doing following the process and amending the fiscal framework. So it causes a lot of confusion, but the confusion was deliberate. You know, when people were caught off guard,
Sure.
this instance, so they take a break, they go out, and then there's some deliberation. The chair says that he wants advice, right? What transpired when he came back was something that shocked all of us. Now, Action SA has moved from we want to amend to we are making a recommendation. And we tell them that no, but the recommendation is not binding and it's against the money bills amendment procedure, which clearly stipulates that you either accept or you amend. Why are we not amending? Because we have powers. They have no explanation for it. You can tell that it was a caucus decision, but also malicious compliance and procedural. And then that's when I think we took a decision to say, when the final report comes, we must raise it with the speaker. But it got worse. At the end of that meeting, it was not clear what was being adopted. It was not clear, even to the chair. I think he was not sure himself. He wanted the report just to go through.
Yeah.
You know, and when people raise this question, what are we adopting? He had no explanation. How do you make people vote for things that they are not sure about? Doesn't make sense. Even if 3 out of 10 people know what is happening, but you must make time and effort. And we still had time. No one was rushing out of that meeting. You could have just explained thoroughly that now we are voting for either amending or accepting. And then later on, when we're done with that, we'll then vote for the report. So that process, entire process was unprocedural. It was actually illegal, you know. And we got the report from the committee secretary around 11 midnight. And then we wrote to the speaker to say that the report was not adopted procedurally. It must be withdrawn. She must not allow it to be tabled before the House. That email was sent to the speaker before 12 midnight. The following morning, we waited for the response. None came from the speaker. I must tell you, I think she's one of the most unresponsive speakers we've had in the past 10 years that I've been in Parliament. The thing with other previous speakers, Balekambete, Thandimudis, Nosiviwe Mapisa, they will respond to your correspondence, but they will disagree with you.
Sure.
But they would have responded nonetheless. She doesn't respond.
She's unresponsive.
She's very lethargic. You know, you get a response, but I mean, she will instead issue a press statement through parliamentary communication of 2 paragraphs. Instead of engaging members of parliament who are democratically elected, she doesn't respond. So when we started the sitting, the Treasurer General, Komiso Mpile Maud, she stand up and raised the point which is contained in our letters. And the speaker's response, all she said was, no, I was told that the procedure was followed. That's all. And we were supposed to just take that and allow it. Instead of saying, I have listened to the recording, I don't see the complaint that the EFF is putting before me because I have listened to the recording. She didn't do that. She just said, no, the chair, the very same chair who followed an unprocedural process, told me that we followed the process, and she believed it. So at that moment, I think she chose to protect the interest of GNU. She chose to protect the president, and she stopped being a speaker of the National Assembly and she became a speaker of the ANC. And then, which led to a decision which, as argued in court, and I think the court will agree to us when they do the final judgment, but also from the court order, you can see that we're correct. It doesn't matter what defense the parliamentary communication put before us, but the reality is that the process was not followed. We had an opportunity to amend the fiscal framework for the first time in 30 years, for the first time since the adoption of the money bills in 2009. It was going to be the first time. We had the opportunity, there was consensus, no one wanted VAT increase. What was so difficult with simply just saying, as the committee, we hereby amend the fiscal framework, we don't want VAT. That's it.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah. And how did we arrive at proposing or the proposal of VAT increase by 2% initially. And that obviously got a backlash, and it was reversed to 1% and now divided into 2 financial years, 0.5 percentage point. Now, what informed the Minister of Finance decision to propose a VAT increase?
So there's something interesting happening at the National Treasury. And Duncan is explaining this, the DG, the Director General of National Treasury, is explaining it, and I think there's something they're missing completely. So the fiscal anchor, according to their explanation, is that then the amount of money that you collect in revenue must always be more than the expenditure before you start paying off interest on debt. And then you will achieve something called the primary budget surplus. And then you can use whatever money surplus is remaining to then start paying off your overall debt. And then the idea is that over time, then you reduce your debt and then you reduce your debt service cost. Debt service cost is interest on loans that we have as a country. But here's the difficulty with this strategy. And particularly at a time when, firstly, Titus, you have 12 million people unemployed. That's number one. Number two, you have majority of almost half the population dependent on social grants. And these are people who are not dependent on social grants because they're just lazy or they don't want to work. They're excluded from the economy, right? And deliberately so. And we can talk about it some other time. But also, the level of inequality in this economy is not going down. It just keeps going up. And it's a very racialized economy. White people continue to enjoy some amount of opulence that is unimaginable, even in standard of first world countries, right? White people in South Africa live better than most white people in Europe, if you look at their GDP per capita. So the challenge with this strategy at the moment is that it takes money out of the economy, right? Because you're trying to do it through increasing taxation, but also cutting spending. And it's not true that the spending they're cutting is for efficiency purposes. In other words, trying to do things better. They're just cutting expenditure, even on programs. The fact that government has no capacity to spend money, particularly local government, they have no capacity to run large infrastructure projects. And this has been the case in the past 20 years. And it's also deliberate because you keep hollowing out skills in local government. You then come across this shortfall that you're trying to make up the revenue so that you always go back to the primary surplus. And the consequence of that will lead to, okay, where can we get quick money? I'm telling you, VAT is like quick money. VAT is like an overdraft in your personal account. When you don't have money, you just go to the bank.
It's a low-hanging fruit.
It's a low-hanging fruit. Credit card borrowing, except they're just taking money from customers here because in terms of administration, it's very efficient. You don't have to put new systems in place as government. You just go and increase digits from 15 to 15.5%, right? Unlike other instruments of taxation, which they may be new, you may be required to draft legislation from scratch. There may be some required consultation, and by the time you finalize them, you need to do some work.
Sure.
VAT straight, quick. They've done it in 2018. They told us it was temporary, but it remained, right? And they're doing it again. And they are going to keep coming back to these quick fixes through personal income tax and then VAT increases. Because there's another part of this, which is not only VAT. We have raised the issue of why are you not adjusting personal income tax brackets in line with inflation? Because this is the second year now they're not doing it. And the consequence of that is you are actually paying more tax than you should you find yourself going to a higher tax bracket. Even when your employer did not pay you more, all they did was to adjust your salary in line with inflation so that you're able to afford petrol, you're able to afford food and transport because the price of goods this year is not the same as last year. That's how the inflation is structured. So that's what led to the Minister of Finance going to the quick fix of the 2%. And when the 2% was rejected, they come back with 2% but in different form. And I can tell you now, they were going to increase it by 0.5 now, and then in the following year, depending on how it goes, they were going to come back with a higher rate. Between personal income tax and VAT, they are still going to find a way of adjusting them so that they make up the shortfall, achieve a primary budget surplus, and stifle the economy. You can't do what they're trying to do when you have an economic crisis. And I think at the Treasury, people are not appreciating that we have an economic crisis. When you look at the documents, the budget review documentation, when you look at the minister's speeches, there's no acknowledgement that we're actually facing a crisis. So even their budget doesn't respond to crisis. It's a budget tabled with some sense of we're fine, it's just maybe a few things here and there. But that's not true. South Africa is facing a deep, deep economic crisis. And you need to reflect that with how you respond with the budget. The president failed to respond to it with the State of the Nation address, but with the budget, you have to demonstrate that we're aware of the economic crisis and this is how we intend to respond.
Sure.
That's what led to that quick fix of 2%, 0.5%.
Sure.
And I'm glad it was rejected by everyone.
Absolutely. And Doc, we know that the EFF has put forward proposals that include apartheid wealth tax on pre-1994 trusts, the increase on corporate tax, like you have touched on, the adjustment on the personal income tax bracket. But when we look at other political parties that were singing from the same handbook, your Action SA, your Rise Mzansi, your BOSA, although some are not necessarily in the GNU, what was their proposal on the fiscal framework, and what made them believe the illusion that it's possible to reverse the fiscal, or to reverse a VAT, even though the fiscal framework has been adopted? And with the EFF's position now, how are you going to ensure that the EFF proposal find expression in the coming fiscal framework or budget, if you like?
Well, I think, Titus, you ask an important question. The first question.
Sure.
So, twofold. What were they proposing, and what made them believe that the approach they're taking will lead them to VAT reversal? So, on the first question, their proposal in the main, and you're talking about, and I'll mention them so that there's some clarity.
Sure.
So you're talking about Action SA, you're talking about Rise Mzansi, and you're talking about BOSA with Musimaiman. Everyone else, you can excuse them because they're inside government. So that budget would have been agreed to in cabinet. And I won't even touch on the DA because it doesn't make sense to me at the moment.
Sure.
The problem with where Action SA, BOSA, and Rise Mzansi sit, one, it's ideological, but two, it's also lack of experience with parliamentary politics. And when you mix the two together, you get this disaster. On the ideological front,
sure,
they come from a school of thought which says that the state, meaning that government and all its arms, including state-owned entities, must play a minimal role in the economy, right? So they think that the state must sit back, regulate, do an oversight, and allow the private sector to build schools, deliver education, build hospital, deliver public health care, and then for profit purpose, but the state must pay for it, right? That's their ideological problem, right? So they don't see a state playing an active role in delivering public service, industrialization, at the forefront of the economy, right? And we'll talk about that some other time. So there's that limitation. So they come to the committee and the fiscal framework with an idea that we must cut spending. Of course, they will camouflage it with, we're not talking about spending cuts and austerity, we're talking about efficiency. But we have studied these things in detail, and we can demonstrate with numbers that you're actually saying the same thing. Financial or fiscal consolidation, spending review exercises, all of them boils down to reducing the size of the state. So they will never make any proposal in the fiscal framework which seeks to expand the capacity of the state, put the state at the forefront of a service delivery. That's number one.
Sure.
And that was their challenge. So if you look at all their proposal, it's where can we cut? Even the leader of Rise Mzansi, Songezoziv, is still saying it even today. To say, okay, where can we cut? Those are the proposals which they put before the Minister of Finance. But let's now deal with lack of experience in Parliament. Once you pass an instrument like a fiscal framework, if you look at section 8, 9, 10, 11, which deals with one fiscal framework, division of revenue bill, appropriation bill, and then revenue bills, in that order, deliberately so, they all say that whatever amendment you must make here, they must be consistent with the fiscal framework.
Sure.
It's there. It's law. It's not suggestive or if you think you should. It's actually written down, right? So the challenge with this, Titus, is that you can't say that we support the fiscal framework, but we intend to change it later. When you can tell that between the 2nd of April and the 1st of May, between constituency period, leave period, holidays, Parliament will not have enough time to process the revenue bills, which can at least support reversal of the VAT increase. So I think that is what led to this disaster. So it's not like the EFF explained this for the first time in court. We explained it in that meeting. In the morning, during lunch and late afternoon when there was pandemonium and hysteria, people were running around as if we were not explaining this thing properly. I mean, it's a very basic thing. At one point, I'm standing next to the Treasurer General of the EFF,
Sure.
a Action SA Member of Parliament, Alan Beasley, and their support staff. I'm explaining that, guys, you can't say you support in one hand, this thing is going to be passed tomorrow, and still hope that there won't be VAT increase on the 1st of May. I explained it, not once, twice. In a very confined private engagement.
Before they even adopted.
Before they even went back and started amending their own proposal from amendment to recommendation. Right? Rise Mzansi was not represented in that meeting. So all their proposals and explanations were getting them from their party leader. And I've explained the challenge he has ideologically. So even when he says that we're supporting this, we don't want the country to find itself without a budget tomorrow because that will lead to a far greater crisis.
Yeah.
Today, we don't have a budget. Today, the JSE did not stop trading. There's no crash of any stocks or any trading.
Yeah.
So you have all these things that were imagined that could happen by lack of parliamentary experience and procedure, but also not knowing the law. Because we kept asking them, which procedure and which law are you going to use to reverse this VAT?
Yeah.
They were all happy, hoping for a miracle. And unashamedly, by the way, no, we don't know what will happen, but we'll find out.
The lack of giraffe view is a problem, yeah.
How do you say that as a leader making such important decision in Parliament to support a fiscal framework with an idea that you can reverse VAT, but you don't know which instrument, which procedure, and how? You are just hoping and praying that the SG of the ANC Mbalula's agreement will make that happen. It's not sensible at all. It's extremely shocking. So when you put these parties together, looking at their proposals and what they wished could happen, you can then tell that partly the ideological incoherence, but also equally a lack of exposure in parliamentary politics, right? But we've passed that now. I think it has been demonstrated sufficiently well that they did not have full understanding of our parliament work. And hopefully, going forward, they will come to the committee, both Standing Committee on Finance and Standing Committee on Appropriation well prepared. But more importantly, the EFF has done quite a number of pamphlets to explain these processes in far much basic manner. So I'm hoping that some of these comrades from other parties will also tap into those pamphlets and just so that when we go to the committee, at least we don't fight over procedure. Let's fight over proposals.
Sure.
At least procedure should be covered. And then your other question, what do we do going forward to make sure that we get our proposals in this space?
Sure.
The Minister of Finance is going to table a new budget. That's what we wanted. Now, he's tabling a new budget in a new South Africa. He's tabling a new budget in a South Africa that has a parliament which now understand that it is within its rights to amend what the minister tables. It's no longer the world where we take National Treasury's word as biblical.
Willy-nilly.
We have to now appreciate that the work must happen in Parliament, in those committees. You know, something shocking happened in one of the committees. So I go to a a standing committee on appropriation with Commissars now. We're looking at the division of revenue bill now. It's chaired by Musimaiman. So we sit in the committee, more or less the same, 6-7 hours. At the end of the committee, there's a section of the report of the committee, which now we're dealing with amendments. So they did the same mistake as the Standing Committee on Finance. They did not want to take a decision first, then write the report. They wanted to do the report first, take a decision later. We thought, okay, that's fine. If you feel strongly about it, it's okay. Now, when we do amendments, the EFF amendments on the division of revenue bill, it's written down, it's submitted to the committee secretary, it's published, right? Commissars now will read them in detail to say, this is the rationale behind the proposals. These are the current figures that are there. Local government is allocated 9.5% of the overall revenue. There's consensus. SALGA agrees with us. The Financial and Fiscal Commission agrees.
Sure.
The Parliamentary Budget Office agrees. Even members of the committee agree that local government does not get enough money to build capacity.
Sure.
The EFF proposal says, let's increase local government allocation within the current fiscal framework so that we're consistent with the money bill, even though we still don't agree with how it was adopted. We say, let's increase local government allocation. Let's take money from provinces and national. Let's not touch health and education. Let's focus on events. Let's focus on media spending that the ANC abuse for campaigning. Let's take money from there. Let's put it in local government. Let's increase that spending from 9.5% to 14%. That would have effectively added 88 billion in local government spending in this financial year. But more importantly, we say, let's ring fence that money and give local government a clear condition that you can only spend this money for insourcing and rebuilding of municipal capacity. No one could disagree with that. We all are in agreement. But what shocked me the most is that the chair of the committee, he says there in the meeting, we don't have capacity to assess the proposal of the EFF. We don't know what to make of it. We may agree in principle.
Sure.
There's even a SALGA proposal of maybe a lesser adjustment. But let's take these things to Parliamentary Budget Office and get their view. But we're saying to them, we've been modeling these numbers, we've been engaging on this for the past 10 years. If you go and read all budget debates, inputs by the EFF in the past 10 years, we've been saying the same thing consistently, updating our numbers, looking at different dynamics, different factors, but we always come with proposals that have numbers. So you don't have to go to anyone. If we agree on a principle politically here, then let's give them an opportunity to comment, but let's take that decision. They refused. But, well, we thought it's not worth fighting for. Let's agree with how the chair is moving. He has admitted that he has no capacity. The committee has no capacity. Let's give it to Parliamentary Budget Office. So we trust the Parliamentary Budget Office because they are independent according to the law. They are established by Section 15 of the Money Bills. So their objective is to give an independent assessment. So we have no reason to doubt them.
Sure.
So when it was given over to them, we were happy to wait for their feedback. But I'm just showing you that there's a problem of capacity. So even when we are taking EFF proposals now, let's appreciate that. So we have to start with the Standing Committee on Finance. So when we go to the Standing Committee on Finance, regardless of what the Minister of Finance table, which I can tell you now already, will be a minor spending adjustment by doing spending cuts. So we'll have to go and reject it. All of us have rejected it already.
Sure.
The ANC says they are tired of austerity budget. They've said it. If you go to the SG's last press conference where he has gathered all mini ANC political parties, they're saying the same thing, right?
Yeah.
He's saying that we're tired of austerity. We don't want spending cuts because it has been crippling public service. So we don't anticipate any difficulty in agreeing with rejecting the Treasury Fiscal Framework based on spending cuts and then say, let's look at the crisis we have and then look at how we then increase the spending. So we'll go there and propose spending adjustments on health and education, both at provincial and local government.
Sure.
We'll go there and look at the public sector and public service. We don't agree that South Africa public servants are paid too much. It's not true. we can agree that they are being paid and they're not doing the work because the state is outsourcing everything. The discussion we must be having is, are we using the public servants cohort correctly? Because they should be the one doing the work. You can't hire an engineer to go and appoint an engineer to plan. When you have an engineer, so the engineer you have in-house is to assess if the engineer outside is doing the work which you want them to do. So we think that it's just a matter of rearranging the public sector, insourcing more of what has been outsourced in the past 30 years. Right. So we'll go and look at public sector wages, how we increase them, but not only increase the amounts, but increase the capacity itself quantitatively.
Sure.
But we also have to look at spending, critical spending on water infrastructure and sanitation infrastructure. See if we can increase there. But what the Treasury will not do, and which we'll have to do in the fiscal framework amendment, is to bring in the component of the monetary policy and start advocating for more spending on industrialization. Even if it means we go and start engaging the Reserve Bank, it must find reflection in the fiscal framework, even if it is not in numbers, but in intention, so that when we leave there, we know that we're going to spend so much trillion, but in addition to that, we'll still have an opportunity to go and tap into the monetary policy, but all intended to have an economic fiscal stimulus budget which will revive the economy.
Sure.
So we've put up a number using the COVID experience, but also what we have argued in the past 10 years to say we could safely, without interrupting anything, inject maybe roughly around 500 billion in this current economy, over and above the proposals we've made on taxation policy, wealth tax, apartheid tax in the form of reparations, trusting, taxing luxurious land holdings, and you know, so and increasing corporate income tax.
Sure.
So we've made those proposals,
Sure.
and then we'll go and make those proposals in the Standing Committee on Finance. In the Standing Committee on Appropriation, we are going to go back and revise our proposal to increase money for local government. We're not done with that. And the good thing is that and the good thing is that there's agreement. So it's just a matter of finalizing the numbers now between ourselves,
Sure.
Parliamentary Budget Office, the Financial and Fiscal Commission, but also other political parties. But in principle, there's an agreement that we need to move more money to local government. That 9.5% allocation currently is not sustainable.
Yeah, and there's too much noise, Doc, and I want us to use this opportunity to demystify these myths and get the facts right or straight. So, the Minister of Finance, Godongwana, has reversed the 2025 Division Revenue Bill. And the impression created is that that decision was taken at the back of consultations with political parties, which included the Economic Freedom Fighters. The ANC met with the EFF along other political parties as well. But I want us to interrogate what could have persuaded the minister's decision to reverse the division revenue bill. Is it because of the political pressure or consultation, or this was as a result of the legal pressure that the EFF has put?
So I think, and I appreciate why it's important to not so much demystify, because there's just too much noise. Right?
Sure, let's clear that.
Let's clear the noise, and to do that, let's be chronological.
Sure.
Let's follow the timeline of what happened, and then you will get to appreciate what happened and what people wished could have happened, which are two different things. So let's start with the 19th of Feb. So in the 19th of Feb, the minister comes and says, I have a budget and it has a 2% point VAT increase.
Sure.
That is rejected. That is rejected even by cabinet, because there are some political parties inside cabinet who said, no, it's too much. We won't survive that as government. We said as the EFF, immediately after that chaotic attempt to have a budget speech. Remember, members of parliament were already inside waiting, and the minister didn't come. It's the speaker who came and says, we're not going to have a budget today, right? That's the first point.
Sure.
Let's go to the 12th of March. The 12th of March, he comes back. And then he says, no, I've heard you. a 2% increase of VAT will not work. I'm increasing it by 0.5 this year and 0.5 next year. For that reason, I think we'll still be able to balance the budget. Now, on the 12th of March, he tables this budget. There's complete rejection of the VAT increase. So whether it's 2% or 0.5, this is the 12th of March, right? So between the 12th of March and the 1st of April, 15 days, right? 1st of April, we go to the Standing Committee on Finance. In that meeting, no one agrees with VAT, right? So everyone rejects VAT. And at that time, we thought, okay, this is going to be easy. If we all reject VAT, it just means we're going to amend the fiscal framework. But then we're thrown a curveball. Action SA says, no, we support the fiscal framework, which include VAT increase.
But
we are going to engage the minister later on so that we reverse this thing. But I'm going to leave the dates, actual dates. Now I'm just going to talk chronologically what happened, right? We can go and find the dates. So from the 1st of April, we go to the 2nd of April in the House. The fiscal framework was adopted. We've discussed that earlier. Now, we as the EFF met the ANC soon after that, right? We met them. And when we met the ANC led by the President Commander-in-Chief, it became very clear to us that we're meeting the ANC for them to convince us that there must be VAT increase. The ANC actually considered that let's just increase it this year and then next year we'll suspend that increase of the additional 0.5. That's what they said, right? So it means that they did not only sell that pamphlet to the EFF, they sold it to everyone else they met. When those meetings with the ANC were concluded, there's already a court case here, right? We filed our papers. The case is argued. And as discussed earlier, when we were arguing the case, we said, one, the manner in which the VAT is increased under this condition, economic crisis, equality issue, it's irrational, right? That's number one. But the process to adopt the fiscal framework with the VAT increase was unprocedural. At that time, the minister was following those proceedings. And in that court case,
closely monitoring
it, it became apparent that not only is he going to lose, right? But he's going to lose and his persona was going to be reflected on. Because we argued that the way he engaged Action SA, he did not only just hoodwink them, but he was very deceitful in how he did it. He gave them an impression that you can still reverse this thing only if you give me proposals that are acceptable. But in his court papers that he put before the court, I was never under the impression that VAT will be reversed. That's the minister. To my knowledge, on the 1st of May, there's going to be a VAT increase of 0.5 percentage point. Those are court papers. This is not press statement. This is not political theater by the SG of the ANC. These are court papers. And you must appreciate the significance of court papers.
Legit.
Now, legit. In those deliberations, the DA go first, we come second. When the minister's lawyer and parliament lawyer presented their case, by the time they finished, the entire defense had collapsed. It was clear that, firstly, the fiscal framework is going to be set aside. Possibly, it was going to be found that the manner in which the minister increased VAT was illegal, unconstitutional, right? And then, the same day after the presentation of the case, the minister's lawyer, they start reaching out to both the DA and the EFF. They want to negotiate out of court. The minister even tells the parties involved to say, please don't make these engagements public.
Oh, okay.
Let's just discuss it in secret. Unfortunately, that madam of that other province, she couldn't hold herself.
Sure.
She immediately released a statement. So, no, the ANC want to talk to me. They want to reach a settlement. So, out of excitement and politically strategic, she spilled the beans, But in spilling the beans, then it led the ANC into an unplanned frenzy. That very same day, it was a Wednesday. On Thursday, we were scheduled to have a meeting with the ANC. and the ANC was scheduled to have a meeting with all political parties.
Mm-hmm.
The EFF was scheduled to have a meeting with the ANC at around 4 o'clock. So the program had to change completely. The court presentation led the ANC to hold a press conference at 10 or 12, I think. And what came out of that press conference is that, okay, no, we're conceding. This idea of VAT is a bad idea. We're happy that the minister who issued a statement midnight, he says that it was daytime when he was in DC, but to us it was midnight. I didn't know that he traveled with the treasurer when he travels. I learned that now.
Sure.
In all my years of studying the treasurer, I didn't know that. Anyway, he sent a communication midnight, 3-4 paragraph statement to say, okay, we're reversing VAT, we're tabling a legislation in parliament. And Titus, this is very important. When the minister says we're withdrawing budget instrument and we're reversing VAT, right? Midnight, which influenced the ANC press conference. You then get to appreciate that both the National Treasury, Parliament, and the ANC, they are so desperate, they're not reading the fine print of the law. When that announcement was made to say we're reversing VAT increase, we're suspending the implementation, we're withdrawing budget instrument that are already tabled in Parliament.
Through a media statement,
midnight, when we're sleeping. We find out about it Thursday morning. And the very same Thursday morning, there's a press conference of the ANC at 12 with all political parties who had supported the VAT increase. Now they are happy that the VAT increase is not going to be implemented. Even at that time, we are saying to them, just by a mere press conference and the minister's statement, it does not reverse the announcement made.
And they're all happy. I saw Bosa, leader there, being excited. Yeah, we told you.
They're all happy, and we didn't understand the excitement, the hysteria.
Yeah.
I kept asking, okay, why do you think that just the mere introduction of the bill in Parliament and the announcement by the ANC will then suspend the implementation of VAT? And I got to appreciate later on that the way the bill was written when it was tabled, because it was tabled after the press conference, it says that we suspend and then we'll do the law later. It's not done. You don't make legislative decision based on executive announcement. It's not done. That's why the challenge of VAT Act 74 is very important. We can't work on the whims of ministers who wake up, announce this today, tomorrow they do that. When in Parliament we're working with strict laws and rules, it's not done. So when we told them that VAT is going to come into effect on the 1st of May, unless there's court intervention, they did not believe it. They did not believe it. They argued against it. And guess what happened? The court order of the Western Cape High Court is the one which suspended the implementation of VAT increase.
Not the media statement.
Even after the court order, Musi and Helen and Songezo Zivi, they say that the court order is giving effect to their announcement. But they were not parties to the court order, to the court proceeding. So how do they then become part of what you did in court is giving effect to what we've announced?
Claiming easy victories.
But it doesn't end there. Yes, the Parliament on, I think, must have been Wednesday or Tuesday, they issue a statement. That's how they communicate with us these days. We write letters, then they issue tweets. They say on one of the tweets there, had it not been for the court order, there was no other way of suspending the VAT increase. And why, Titus? The rates bill that was tabled by the minister, firstly, it's unlawful. And I'll tell you why it's unlawful in a second. But secondly, you did not have enough time between when it was introduced and when you need to pass it. And a bill does not get effective because it does not become in effect because the Parliament has passed it. A bill becomes implementable law and binding when the president has enacted the bill.
Sure.
The president can say, I've signed the bill today, but it must start being implemented next month. It's well within his right. But a bill does not become a law because Parliament has passed it. Because there are bills that have been passed by both houses of Parliament and the president returned them. So you couldn't have gone ahead and implemented a VAT reversal without a signed legal instrument. So it only had to be the court that intervenes, right? Because the one thing that people are missing here is that no one wanted a VAT increase. We all rejected it. So why would anyone want it when we have all rejected it? So the court came to the rescue of South Africans and the workers and the poor. And timely so, when there's still some room to could communicate with vendors. That is why no one must accept any price that has VAT in it, because it will be illegal. And they won't get their money back, by the way, if they pay. Right? Doesn't matter what the shops are saying. You won't get your money back if you pay with a VAT increase. So it was irrational of the commissioner of SARS to want to put to a VAT rate, because one of the key principles of VAT, not VAT, taxation, is that tax must be certain. You must know how much tax you are paying at all times. Even administratively, it becomes easier and lawful, So we have dealt with that part. So the other second part which makes that rate bill illegal, the law, Section 11, Titus, where you deal with the revenue bills on the money bills amendment procedure, it says that the revenue bills must be consistent with the fiscal framework, approved fiscal framework, but also the division of revenue bill. So we are asking the Speaker of Parliament, how do you allow the minister to table a bill and you allow the committee to even schedule a meeting to process this bill when the court has set aside, the court order has set aside the fiscal framework, but equally the minister has withdrawn the division of revenue bill. So the key two legislation or budget instrument that you need, one being legislation, one being the fiscal framework, are not present before Parliament. So why do you allow this revenue bill to proceed? Because if we don't assume that we will not want to change it.
Sure.
Because we're going to change it. There's a problem with one of the tax instruments in that rates bill, which we're going to change. So how do we change it when we don't have the fiscal framework and the division of revenue?
Yeah.
And that's what led to the cancellation of the meeting of the Standing Committee on Finance, which Dr. Maswanganye had scheduled. And he's scheduling the meeting out of desperation. I can tell you now. He's getting political pressure to make sure that the ANC continue to claim some victory and manage the fallout between them and their GNU partners. Just take a loss. It happens. You're not always going to get things right. In this instance, you got it wrong. It's okay. Let's move. But we can't move if you still want to manage everything else. Parliamentary communication must be merged with the ANC communication. It must tell the same story with the minister's story. That don't make sense. That's where you're going to have a problem. Just accept that we made a mistake here and there. Take South Africans into confidence. The minister must table a new bill. Let's start from scratch. That's what we all want. Instead of trying to push this bill so that later on you can say it's the Minister of Finance who reversed. The man had no intentions of reversing VAT increase.
He was forced to.
He was forced to, and he was not forced to by proposals of Action SA in his own affidavit that he sent in the last minute, even after the press conference. He said, none of the proposals that were submitted to me by all political parties, including the EFF, by the way, he says, none of you persuaded me otherwise. So why we can't claim a victory over the minister's reversal through our submission to him? He never considered what the proposal we gave them. It's through the court where he was forced to concede to say, okay, yeah, I don't see any other way. The parliament tweet I was talking about earlier, it has a section there which says that if it was not for the court order, we did not have enough time to pass the law in such a manner that it will reverse the VAT increase. So it was that court which led to the suspension of the VAT increase, hence the settlement. Whether they want to debate settlement out of order, what it means, we're still going to have a judgment anyway, which will come and clarify all this muddy situation.
Yeah. And we appreciate that comprehensive answer, Doctor. Let's look at the conduct of the Speaker of Parliament and the Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Finance, Dr. Joe Maswanganyi, and Mayor Toko Didize, respectively. Is it political thuggery or incompetence? I mean, they know that there are procedures that need to be followed. And there's a court order for that matter. In your view, what do you think informed their decision to sort of want to bypass the court order and still want to process revenue bills despite the court order?
Well, I think it's desperation. I think we've entered uncharted waters and they are found flat-footed. I think it's desperation on the side of the speaker. I mean, the Speaker of Parliament is surrounded by a collective of seasoned administrators.
Okay.
From the Secretary to Parliament,
Yes.
the Secretary to the National Assembly,
Okay.
their entire team. We have engaged with them. Myself, I've engaged with these colleagues for the past 10 years. These are seasoned professionals. They've worked under extreme difficulties in the past. I mean, they've presided over the National Assembly, which wanted to remove a president through a motion of no confidence. So they've managed some difficult.
So you think their counsel is overlooked?
Not so much overlooked. I think everyone is just under a shock, institutional shock. And with institutional shock, there may be pieces of legislation, like in this instance, the money bills amendment procedure that have been overlooked in the past because they inside majority. But also you can't discount that given the conduct of the speaker, at least ever since she got elected last year after the elections, I'm one of those who think that if I were to assess both objectively and subjectively, she's one of the most non-responsive speakers that we've had. And I'm speaking from a researcher and a caucus administrator.
Sure.
If you were to get even a reflection of those who are members of Parliament and her colleagues, they may even give you a far much worse assessment of how she has conducted the business of Parliament. When it comes to Dr. Maswanganya, I mean, he's a very engaging chairperson. He listens to submissions. We'll give you time. He kept reminding us that he was a teacher and a principal. He has appreciation of pedagogy,
Yeah.
So my assessment of the situation is that there is not a good understanding of the money bills amendment procedure, both in Parliament and in the National Treasury. It's almost like an instrument that you have never have to bother with because you can do without.
Sure.
But when you were required now to use it effectively, you were found wanting because we had to teach you some of the basics. We know it better because we've been using it in the past to try and amend this budget instrument. And as a result, I think it was just found flat-footed. And for that reason, I think going forward, he may be better prepared to manage the contestation in a much more effective way.
Yeah. Now, let's talk about the technical know-how of formulating a cogent, credible and lawful budget for South Africans. Now we understand that the way forward is the minister must table the third budget. What are the processes that are legally expected to unfold? Because we don't want a situation where we have further procedural blunders and illegality in terms of the processes and procedures that unfold in adopting the new fiscal framework and ultimately the budget. What are the processes that are expected to unfold and what is likely to happen?
So I listened to the Treasury press briefing, giving us the technical specification of how they're going to do their work. And let me tell you, it's not like I'm more informed than I was before the press conference. So I'm just going to wait for the budget once it's tabled.
Sure.
That's the first thing. But secondly, I think the President and Commander-in-Chief is correct. It can't be this minister who tables the third budget.
Okay.
I don't think it will have the necessary credibility. I don't even think it must be the same DG. We can tell them, we can't force them to make changes to their leadership. We can tell them. So I don't think the budget will come with credibility. I don't think it should be this minister to table it. But on the technical side of the budget, I don't even think the National Treasury has the capacity to recalibrate the budget so that it reflects everyone's submission in a manner that there could be some intervention in the economy in the next 12 months. That for me, that's obvious. I'm not sure if it's obvious for anyone else. But in terms of Parliament, the technical side of how we formulate a credible budget, regardless of what the Minister of Finance gives us,
Sure.
we can already anticipate what we'll get. So that Parliamentary Budget Office has to be given sufficient time and capacity to could engage the budget in all fronts, both the process and the technical nuances of the budget. We need the Financial and Fiscal Commission to prepare a detailed submission to make reflections on the budget. And I know now that they're in a better position to make that detailed submission because they held a roundtable discussion. And in that roundtable discussion, I was present. We made submission. There were submissions from civil society, business, including people who will not necessarily agree with. But they made those submissions. So they must find expression in the FFC submission to Parliament. Once that is done, we need to expand public hearings. We must not have all public hearings condensed in one day because we just want to have some level of malicious compliance. If we issue out a notice to say we're calling for submissions, firstly, those who indicate that they want to come and make submissions in Parliament must be given ample time to go through their submission. They must not be given 2 minutes. You come there with a presentation of 15 minutes, then you are told in the last minute that, no, actually, you're just going to be given 2 minutes. But also, we must not hold these important meetings through virtual platforms. We must physically sit in Parliament and listen to each and every submission that is made, interrogate it, and it must be captured properly so that when we go to the report of the committee, when we look at the recommendations and the amendments which we must take into account, they reflect what was given to us. But on the political side, political parties must come prepared. You must not come there with an amendment and later on you are swindled into agreeing that it must be a recommendation. If you come with your amendment, table your amendment. Should it find favor, that's good. Should it not, you know why. Let's not muddy the water with converting amendments into recommendations. But on the technical budget itself, I think we've spoken about areas which we're going to pay attention to, which will deal with expanding the size of the state, funding education and health and infrastructure, and also funding local government. So in that way, I think even if we don't get everything that we want, there may be some shift towards one, amendment of the proposal by the Treasury, but secondly, I think people will want to meet each other halfway so that there's some consensus on key things, and then those other things which we're willing to let go, then we can try next year when we deal with 2026, 2027 budget.
And we should give credit to the EFF for always being the vanguard of the people, defending the constitution, the rule of law, and restoring the credibility and the integrity of Parliament. Now, what happens, Doc, if the parties do not agree on the new budget? What is the likelihood? What are the prospects? If the finance minister formulates and tables a new budget which the EFF vehemently disagrees with, and other political parties disagree with, what then happens? Because now the budget has been turned back for the second time. Now it's going for the third time. What then happens if it becomes rejected for the third time?
Well, maybe I'm being too pessimistic, Titus. Firstly, I don't think we'll pass the budget on time. That's my view. And I'll be happy to be proven wrong, right? I don't think by the end of July we'll pass the budget. I mean, I attended the Chief Whip's meeting on Wednesday. I attended the programming committee. Firstly, these meetings are being held virtual, so they're not that constructive. But secondly, I think it's not clear what everyone wants to achieve in terms of reviving the parliamentary program and revising it so that it fits into the timeline of the legislation as to by when you can pass the budget. But let's say the worst case scenario happen. Let's say we arrive at end of July and there's no budget. You can't spend government money without a budget. It's illegal. It's unconstitutional. Therefore, you don't have a government. I'll leave it there.
If we don't have a government, that calls for, should we say, early elections?
It calls for many things. It calls for
we must reset.
We must reset.
Reconfiguration.
Not only the budget, but the government.
Yeah. And complete overhaul.
Complete overhaul.
So South Africans must brace themselves.
South Africans must brace themselves. In municipalities, if a council cannot pass a budget, we dissolve the government and reconstitute new mayor, new MMCs. I don't know why people think the same can apply to national government. And maybe they're not thinking about it. Yeah.
All right. Doctor, thank you very much for coming through and always giving us the superior logic and informing the public about the issues around the budget. We learn a lot, and I hope South Africa will take decisive decisions, informed decisions, because it is a setback to be led by people who are directionless, people who do not inspire confidence. So I think with the EFF as the official opposition party, our people will be safe. But thank you very much for coming through, Doc.
No, I agree, and I agree with you. We must give credit to the economic freedom fighters. We're always at the forefront of trends in knowledge and contestation. It's not the first time. We did with Nkandla, we did with many other things, and we're just continuing now. The institution has appropriate capacity to could intervene when necessary.
The EFF was not made by people who were pushed.
No, there are wheelbarrows and there are people who push them. I think that's what President meant to say. That's what he said, actually.
That's what he said. So the EFF was not made by people who were pushed.
No, there are wheelbarrows and there are people who push them.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, people of South Africa, and the diaspora. We've come to the end of the show. Please do subscribe to the EFF podcast on our YouTube channel. Thank you very much. We've come to the end of the show. Until we meet again, good.